All right, so as I mentioned, I was getting a haircut, so that's neatened up, beard's trimmed up. Big day with the kids. Got a little bit of energy left in me, so I think I'm gonna see if I can finish up these initial models for the charity auction web app that we started. So again, this is episode 6, so if you are joining along, I'm gonna build out the rest of the models in a Ruby on Rails application for a charity auction. The requirements we figured out in episodes 1 and 2, and then we set up the Rails environment in episode 3. And then in episode 4 and 5, we've been working on the models. It's a pretty basic application, but it's based on a real situation. So I think it's a little bit interesting. And it's going to be a API first, JSON API compliant server with an Ember front end once we're done with it. So tonight, again, I don't have too much energy in me, I don't think, but enough just to finish up the basic model work. There isn't a lot of thinking involved. So let's get to it. All right. So I think I just left my computer open all day. I haven't been on it since this morning. So let's figure out where we were. Okay, so here were the issues that we had left. We had finished these 4. We did the auction model first. Then I think we did the donation category and bid type models. Those were both kind of seeded data. Wouldn't necessarily have had to be models. Then we did the user. So now it's going to be on to really donation, auction admin, then bid, then payment, I think in that order. So let's just, we'll either do auction admin or donation next. This is a real simple join model just between the auction itself and a user to define which ones are going to be admins on the auction. Now we haven't really done anything related to authorization or authentication, so maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, except there is this idea of an auction chair, which I think is something that I know we're going to want, which is only sort of related to the authorization bit. So this is only going to take a couple seconds to do. So why don't we do this one first? And again, this is just saying, okay, an auction has a direct relationship to some users, which are which can be administrators. And I mean, thinking about it, I think this idea that there is sort of 2 levels of administrators, both a basic administrator plus the chairs, that seems like overkill to me. So I'm going to get rid of that. We could always come back and add it later if we wanted to. But I think this is just going to say, okay, there's a relationship between an auction and a user to define who the admins are. We'll call those the chairs maybe in the user interface. And if we have a need for something more than that later, we can do so. Now I know that sometimes it feels like a little bit of overkill to build a new model to join these 2 instead of, like, say, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it'd be nice to store the array of user IDs maybe on the auction. But I'm going to say, you know what? I've learned from past experience that the join table itself, sort of the relationship between the 2 things, ends up having a life of its own. So just create the join model anytime it feels, sort of err on the side of doing that anytime it feels like maybe that could possibly be the right way to go. And we're going to do that here. All right. All right, so now neither of these can be null. So I'll just set that now instead of coming back later to do it. All right. So there really are only a couple of things here. I mean, so for one, we've got those 2 attributes. And as I mentioned, just for the sake of, I've mentioned this every time, but for the sake of having the documentation be sort of complete in the spec itself, I always just say that it should belong to or have the attributes that it has. I don't think that that's like sort of strictly required, but I think it's nice to be able to look at the spec and know that there aren't any attributes or relationships that aren't mentioned. All right. That's just me typoing here. Like I said, I don't have boundless energy tonight, so we'll see how long this goes. Okay, so we've got those. Now the only other things is, let's say we want to, we want to validate the presence of each of these. We'll do that. And that's protected in the database, but we want the error messages to be nice. So we're gonna add the validation for both. I mentioned it at some point, but if you're wondering how I'm running the tests sort of as I go, I just use the Ruby test package for Atom. And, there are really 3 shortcuts that are helpful to know. And that's it. So, in this case, I'd run this. It should fail. I did Control Command R to run it. Then I used the RSpec helper. We can look at what it's called later, but package for Atom to switch back and forth between the spec and the model class, or not just model, but whatever class the spec is for. Then, all right, and then I do Command Control E to run the last test, and it'll pass. So I do that sort of, and then what is it? Control Command X to toggle that window off, and I'll use those commands constantly. I had to look because I'm so used to my fingers doing them. I didn't know what they were, but okay. So what else do we have? So we've got those 2. Now, I guess we want to validate the uniqueness of a user scoped to an auction, right? Because we don't want to have like multiple auction admin join models between a given user and a given auction. That wouldn't make any sense. So we're going to do that. Now, I don't remember if, let's go take a look. I don't remember if shoulda matchers provides a matcher for this situation or not. It probably does. It's pretty, validates uniqueness stuff. It's pretty robust at this point. So I'm just going to search for scope. So it's scoped to validates. Okay. Yep. So it does. So we can say it is expected to validate. Now, if you've watched the other episodes, you think that all I do here is write validations and basic models, and that's not really true. That's just the beginning. This is the very beginning of an application. We're just setting up things to make sure that we don't permit bad data, that the errors are right, sort of low level, boring to some degree. Take a couple hours to do for this app, and I'm going slow to talk about it. So don't get, don't think that's where we're going to stop. Well, but it's part of the process. So there we go. So we're going to say validates uniqueness of, and this will be user ID, and then scoped to auction ID. Not sure about that error that I just saw, but let's find out what the deal is here. So now this is uniqueness. Let's look up the Rails guides for this. Now I have this in Dash. I don't know why I just didn't look at that. So I could do validates uniqueness of, here we go. And then it's just scope. Okay. So if you don't use Dash, I highly recommend it. It's a great application for documentation browsing on the Mac if that's what you use. So now I'm going to actually move this down to a validates user ID. Okay, so it says not null validation can have a null auction ID. So usually when you see this, this means that there's a database, something we've added to the database sort of schema that then the factory isn't supporting. So and I haven't touched this factory, so I'll take a look at this. So I'm going to say strategy build here, and what that means is that if I say build on auction admin, it won't persist the relationships. That's nice just to avoid database saves, persistence from happening unless you really want it to. And I don't really stress about it happening. I mean, it's fine if it does, but I like to sort of control that. So still setting this as null. This is, anytime I sort of see behavior like this, I don't futz with should have matchers too much. So when I see that, I'm just going to write a normal spec for this and not worry about kind of making it work for should have matchers. Sometimes it just doesn't. And if it doesn't, I don't sweat it. I just move to a normal test. So we'll say it validates the uniqueness of, let's say, user ID scoped to auction ID. Okay, so to test this, what we'll do is first create a, call this original. We'll use the sort of same naming we used before. Auction admin. All right. So I just ran that to see if this would save. So you see null value in column auction ID. So this was a problem with the factory. So let's go back and just figure out what's going on here. It sort of suggests to me that the auction spec is off. Yeah, and in fact it is. Now what the problem was here is that so the problem is that the auction factory is inaccurate. And sometimes I have a single test that will automatically run all of the, sort of try to persist every one of the factories to make sure they're valid so that this issue we just saw doesn't happen. Because then, it'll fail and say, okay, the factory for, this class doesn't make sense. And then we'll sort of not have to do the little bunny trail chase we just did to figure out what's wrong. For now, all I'm going to do is add, given I just saw this error, I'm going to add into the auction spec a test that, in fact, the spec is valid, or the factory is valid. So valid factory. Now, I think that these are sort of ugly tests to have around. And again, I often extract these into a single spec that'll test all of the factories at once. But for now, this will be fine. So we're just going to do expect factory girl.create auction to be persisted. Aha, good. Now we see this is failing, and that's what we wanted. So we'll get this straightened up, and there we go. So first problem is that starts at must be greater than donation window ends at, blah, 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 blah. Time zone is not included in the list. So we've got those three issues to tackle. So we're going to have the starts at be then, the ends at will make a second later, or maybe we'll make it an hour later just to have the data not sort of be weird. Donation window ends at, we're going to have this be maybe a day before. That's fine. We'll just make a sensible name here. So this is 2016 charity auction. Okay, and then time zone ID, we're going to add, say, America, New York. Okay, so now that's valid. So we're going to go back to this. Okay, now, so this is sort of an interesting choice we have. Maybe let's go see if should have matchers would have worked. I'm going to save this here. And then undo. Oops. Let's see. Yeah. So I'm still seeing funniness. So I'm just going to go back to what I was doing before. All right. So now we're going to say, okay, a duplicate equals factory_all.build. Okay. And now this time I'm going to use the original. Let's see. The user will be the original.user, and the auction is going to be the same. Okay, so duplicate.errors. Let's see, I think it was going to be user ID, right? To include, and I don't remember what the name of this one is, so I'm just going to run this and see what it says. Okay, so has already been taken. That's exactly what that it should be. And there we go. So we got that. Good. Let's see what else is left. Well, we've got those two. Now, I didn't put the relationships in this list, but I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to say, like, you know, we want, really, these were relationships. And then I'll call these maybe inverses. Right, so we want to add something to the auction and then the user. Okay. So back in the auction, we want for an auction to have auction admins and then admins. Yeah, so let's add those two. So again, we can keep going with should have matchers for all these basic deals. So it has many auction admins. So the exact workflow I do here is I'll just write that in. I'll run this specific test, which is Control-Command-R. I'll switch to the other side, start going to write it. Run Control-Command-E, and then switch back to keep going. You know, and because they're going to work, but then I can just see that it worked, and sort of what you'd get if you ran guard. But I think guard's a little annoying to constantly be running because I want to direct it a little bit more, and it doesn't take any more time to run the key commands or the shortcuts. So, all right. So again, should have matcher still. You can say has many admins. Now, okay, so this is an interesting choice. So in the auction admin model, the relationship was user, but I think that's the right name for this model. But I think in the context of the auction model, that would feel weird, right? Like if it has many users through auction admins, I think that's incorrect. I think we want to say it has many admins through auction admins. And, you know, I think that there's even an argument to be made, which is that we don't even have to have this has many through at this point. And, you know, and in fact, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to make us need this later. Because sometimes I feel like if you have a has many through relationship, it kind of cheapens the join model, which, like I said before, tends to be a real thing, not just a way to get to the real thing. So kind of to reinforce that idea, I'm actually just going to keep this like it is for now. Just has many auction admins. And then if we feel the need to have admins, you know, the sort of users through auction admins later, we can add it. But I think that's fine to just stick it like this for now. So then on the user side, we're going to do the same thing. All right, so I could have just copied that, I suppose. All right. Now I tend to have the relationships above the validations just because I do. And I tend to put a space between each thing just to kind of keep things neat. Obviously I'm not 100% consistent because I didn't do that before, but I'll switch it to it now that I see that. Okay, so now we've added the inverses then for each of those. I think that that's all we need for now for this. Now this is probably going to get some more to it once we're into the authorization, but for now, I think that's fine. Okay. So add auction user model and inverses. And then this is closes. What number issue is that? 3. All right. Now, not seeing that close makes me think that I accidentally am still in a branch that I didn't think I was. So let's see. I am. Isn't that what I meant to do? So I guess what I'll do is, yeah, just to sort of make this look neater and I don't sweat about the look neater in the history, but since people are watching and looking back at this, maybe I'll try. So okay. So that seems like it's fine. All right, so now we've got that done. Let's now, before I forget, go back to the master branch. All right, and then let's sort of see what our branch situation is out on this. I've got both of those, which I don't want. Let me get rid of these two. Interesting. All right. So now let's just neaten this up. So git fetch -p will, I am no expert in all git commands, trust me, but I knew this one. That will prune the local branches based on what's out on the server, I think. Oh no, it just gets rid of them on the remote, yeah. So I still have to get rid of them here. All right. Cool. So let's get through the rest of these basic deals. Okay, so we've got donation, bid, and payment, and it goes in the order I just set it. So donation's next. Now donation had the most going on with it. So again, this is relatively basic, but we've got to add these attributes and then do some validation and work on this, and we'll see what else comes up here. I tend not to try to think through all the things I have to build on an issue. I just I'll, especially if it's just me doing it, I'll get something down to make sure I've got work to do. Tonight's a good example. I was pretty tired tonight. It's 10:30 here. And if I didn't have this issue around, or these issues around that sort of clearly articulated what I was supposed to do, I would have never worked tonight. I would have just said, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to watch football or go to sleep or watch a movie or whatever. But everyone's asleep and I've got maybe 2 hours of light energy in me. And when I've got an issue, it's not that hard to work through. So we're going to do the donation model next. And I've said this before, but I sometimes hesitate to do this, but I think I'm just going to, run the generator with all the columns, and I think that's fine for now, or for this one at least. Okay. So the title was the name of the auction. Descriptions, the sort of description you'd see in like an advertisement or pamphlet about this. Quantity. What am I talking about? This is the donation. So this is the title of the donation. The description you see in the like on the sign at the table. Quantity is the number of the things that are being donated. Auctions relationship to the model we were just working on. Bid type is also okay. Donor is going to be a user. That's another relationship. Window starts at. Now, okay, I think this is a good opportunity to make this a better name. So when I just read that, I had to double, I had to think through what the heck that meant. That's always a bad sign that when it's not obvious from the name. So I think that what this is the redemption window starts at. So this is the period where you can actually redeem the, cash in the donation or the use of the donation. And, is this a great name? I don't know, but it's better than that one because I wondered what window starts at meant when I first read it. And then when I thought about it, I said, oh, right, it's the redemption window starts at. So let's just make that clear. And I mean, it kind of does matter what this name is, because when we, this is going to be API first. Once we publish the API, we're not going to change the name of an attribute. I mean, it would take some serious reason, and this would not be a good enough reason. So you kind of have to get it right to some degree, or you have to live with a crappy name later, sort of pick your poison. But I'm going to go with redemption window starts out. That's fine. Estimated value dollars is the estimated value in dollars of the thing. Now, is it a little ugly to have dollars instead of putting the currency in a separate column? Kind of. Yes, it is. I'm going to keep it like this for now. Just because thinking through that is going to take more time than I have to do on this sort of charity project, and it could be an interesting thing to redo later. I think once we have the API, we may not want to, but it's no big deal to just have it this way for now before the API exists. I mean, now that I've said it out loud, I really hate that I've got dollars hard-coded in there. But like I said, late. I don't have time to think through how to do that right now. Maybe that'd be an interesting other episode. Okay. So I'm to this display description, Now, what the heck is the difference between description and display description? Oh, I know what this was. So this was what will we have to display on the table for this item? Like, so for example, a picture of the thing or a video of the thing or just a description of it or the actual item itself or whatever. So that makes me wonder if this wasn't named right too. But I don't have a better idea right now. So I'm going to go with that. So when you're doing this sort of work, if you don't have this kind of dialogue going on in your head constantly about every one of these, either you've got it all right, or more likely you're probably not sort of looking at things with a critical enough eye. So I'm just constantly scanning for problems. And we've seen three. Like, I don't like the name of this, and I think that the dollars here and the dollars there are short-sighted. And I suspect we'll fix that in a future episode, but I just at least am thinking through it, right? So that when I work again, maybe, in fact, why don't we do this? So I'm actually going to create an issue on the one that I've talked about a few times, which is like reconsider hard coding of dollars as currency unit. I'm going to call this a bug because that'll really get under my skin later. All right, so now I know I will not forget. So I'm going to continue on. Okay, so admin follow-up needed. It's not 100% clear to me why this was needed actually, but I know that it was on the forum that they have for donations, and I could imagine why you'd need the admin of an auction to follow up on an item about something. So what the heck, we'll implement this. Perhaps we need to sort of extract this into a ticketing system or some such thing, but whatever for now, it's fine. Item number is just like the pretty unique item number for an auction that a given item has. And we may, this is also an interesting choice in that we're probably going to have to like store the order of the donations for the auction for the purpose of kind of putting them in or printing them, or auctioning them, or putting them at tables or whatever. So we may have a join model that does that, that puts them in a particular order, and that we may end up moving the item number to that model. Yeah, maybe we will, but I'm going to keep it here for now. And then fulfillment type is an enum. You'd think that I would have done us a favor and actually written the enum here. Not sure why I didn't, or what the values are, but I'm not sure why I didn't. Fulfillment type. And that's an integer when it's an enum in Rails, because we're going to use the built-in Rails functionality for this. Okay, so I think that was everything. All right, so let's just check out the ones that we're going to validate. Now, I suspect we're not going to actually add any sort of like null falses or uniques. Yeah, so, and I think the reason we're not going to is that we're going to want to allow people to sort of like store the donation before it's actually ready. It's sort of done. We're going to need to extract that idea of like whether the donation is complete or not. We're going to have that idea somehow in the app. That'll be an interesting thing to code. So I think that what that means is that all of the user supplied things like the title, description, the quantity, those are not going to be required because we can have sort of a draft of a donation that exists. The auction itself that the donation is related to, now that is going to be, that has to be set. So I'm going to set null false in that one. And the donor, I'm going to say has to be set too. I think if we don't have a donor on a donation, I think things will get wacky. So I'm going to make life easier for us to make and require that. The rest of them, I believe we can just sort of leave as they are. Now, I'm looking at this item number thing, and I am kind of convinced that it's the wrong call to put this on donation. I feel like this is going to be an attribute of that sort of like, the auction order model that we don't yet have, or donation, order. So I'm going to get rid of that. It feels off. I don't want to sort of pollute the app with that when I'm kind of confident that that's the wrong place to put it. All right. So okay. So this says the donors does not exist. So that's on this foreign key here on donor. So let's look up the documentation it belongs to. I'm not sure if I have to move the foreign key elsewhere so that I can sort of say what the type is. Belongs to favorite person, class name, person. Foreign type. Sue, I think it's, oh no, this is, what am I doing? That's the active record one. I think I just remember that I have to move this. So let's look at what the syntax is for add foreign key. All right. So from table is the table with the key column. To table contains the referenced primary key. Okay, so this is add foreign key. Now the from table then is donations, because that has the donor column, donor ID column. So let's see, to table then is users, and then column is donor ID. From table, yep. Okay, so that's right. Well, I shouldn't say that so confidently. I think that's right. Yeah, looks right. All right, so we've got that. All right, so we'll do like the basic, just like documentation tests, and then we'll get to some of the logic. We don't really have any behavior yet, but there's some logic around validations in particular, I think, that we've got to get to at this stage of what we're building. So let's go through them. I think that really all we have is that the auction, it's going to validate the presence for this and this for sure. And then the rest of these, we just are going to have those attributes. Now, I'm going to make good on my little, on what I said before about needing to have documentation in the model of all the attributes. And I mean, like sometimes when you've got a big long list like this, it feels like particularly nasty, but sometimes that's a reminder that maybe I've got too many models jammed into one. So I kind of like see this as my penance. Like, all right, if I'm really going to have all of these attributes on this one model and I'm not going to break it apart into more things, and I think that that's probably about appropriate now. I mean, you could see a couple opportunities to extract here, but you know, and I already took one of them out for that reason, but I don't know. It's really not that many, and it's fine. So again, this is the penance. You're going to have lots of attributes on the model. On a single model, you're not going to cut corners. You're just going to, talking to myself, but you know, you're just going to do the thing you say you do on models, except for all of them. And again, we just didn't have display description, but the rest of them I did have. Okay. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so we've got that. Now we've got those two presence validations, so auction and donor. We'll add those. Oh, and it also has we'll do this. Auction and then donor. These are required relationships. It's obviously not plural, it's one. Okay, so donor does not exist, so we have to add the class name onto this. Oh, that's really smart. I put the same class name as the one that doesn't exist. Okay, and then let's see, validate presence of required relationship. Okay. Okay, so those are fine now. All right, so we've got those. So I think we're good on title. We're good on description. We can get rid of item number. Quantity, quantity has to be greater than 0 if it's present, so we need to add that. Let's see. I think that should have matches even has one for this, actually, now that I think about it. Let's see, so it's going to be something like is expected to validate numericality of quantity is greater than 0. I think that this is I think that's the syntax. Yep. Looks like it is. So expected class to be able to set quantity to ABCD. Ah, but got 0 instead. So this is interesting. So we're going to want to, this is we want it to allow nil. Now, when I change this, it's still going to fail. But the reason is that there's going to be some deal on should it matchers that you know, is like the allow nil flag on top of it, and I don't know what it is, but we're going to find out. So allow nil. Oh, okay. I just put that on the end. Or so I thought. Yeah. All right. So I said this before. This is my rule of thumb. I do not fidget with should it matchers for long. So I'm just going to write it out. The whole point is to save you time. If it's going to add time to me, I just don't deal with it. And plus it ends up being a little cute. I'm not that cute. So this is it. Validates that quantity is either blank, nil or greater than 0. And I'll just do this in a single test. Some people don't like this, and I do. So I like to make it explicit that the quantity is nil when I'm going to test that. So I'll just say that, even though it is nil actually at this point. I don't think it's clear enough when you read the spec that way. So I always sort of set it to nil to be clear that that's what's going on. And then I'll validate it, and then expect subject.errors quantity to be empty. Okay. Now, you know, if it is stressful to not see it fail first, if I remove that, it'll fail. And I'll add that back, and it didn't fail. So, okay, then subject.quantity equals 0. And again, this is, sometimes people don't like sort of adding them all into one spec, but I think in this case, it's just pollutes up the spec a little bit to have all three when it's really a single type of validation that I'm checking. So I'm going to put all of these expectations in one thing. Okay, so to okay, so that's good. And then I'll set it to 1. I guess it's this one, isn't it? Cool. Now, if I go back and just comment this out, since we sort of went a little bit out of order there, it works like we'd expect. Okay. So I think that's all we need to do for quantity. Auction, we're done with. Bid type, there's nothing more to do. Oh, we need to make sure that we state here that there's a bid type relationship. Okay. Donor, I think we've already got that one set. Okay, so now redemption window starts at and ends at. So I think this is like before, and we probably should have a matcher that does this, but where we want to say that we want to check that this is after this, if this, or I'm sorry, that ends at is after starts at, if starts at exists or is present, and so is ends at. So we're just gonna we're going to test for that. Validates that this. I don't have to put the sort of if in this description. I think that's sort of implied. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set them equal to each other. So I'll say subject dot redemption window starts at equals date time dot new 10, what is it, 11. Now I'm going to set it, I'm going to like write it out that way just to sort of make it clear what my intention is instead of setting this date to some sort of like, variable. I think it's a little more clear if you write it this way. Okay, so now the ends at is equal to the starts at. I'm going to do subject valid and then expect that subject there's and there. Okay. So we're going to do validate redemption window ends at greater than starts at. Now, I think that there are multiple schools of thought about if you put like an if blah, blah, blah up here. And I wish I had a single way to do this. I think I tend to just look at the specific example and try to figure out if the if is sort of a just guard. And if it's a guard, like in other words, something that would be I'm like protecting against something, not sort of sectioning off. If it's a condition, I sort of handle it one way. If it's a guard, I handle it a different way. And of course, a guard sort of has a condition associated with it. So maybe this distinction is dumb, but anyways, this is what I go with, and maybe it doesn't matter much. So I'm going to say return unless both of these are here, right? Because if only one of them is there, there's nothing to test. And then this is if the redemption window ends at is less than or equal to the starts at. And I'm going to just paste from the test. Okay. Cool. There we go. That worked. And then I'll just to sort of make sure that I'm not being too aggressive with that validation, I will now fix it. All right, so I'll say like that the ends at is equal to the starts at plus a second. And then validate it and then make sure it thinks it's valid. And that should be fun. Okay. So we're good on those two. Estimated value in dollars. I think this has to be just a greater than or equal to 0. I think someone could say 0, and that makes sense, sort of. Or at least I can imagine someone doing that. I don't think we want to have to put an error. But I think it sort of logically makes no sense if it's a negative number. So let's just validate that. what is that called? Boy, every time I see dollars, it reminds me that's a bad decision. So maybe yet another reason to have it in the name. I think did we figure out that this allow nil didn't seem to work before? I think we did. I'm just going to write this out. Greater is either, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing, right? So subject quantity, or quantity, estimated value dollars equals nil, subject valid, nils, like a guy from Scandinavia. Expect subject. All right, so allows that, fine, whoops. And then we're at -1 now. Okay, so it's not validating that, so we need to add that. It's greater than or equal to 0. True. Okay, and then we'll just make sure it works. You're right. All right, minimum bid in dollars. So I think we do need to validate this too. Now this needs to be, I'm thinking about it. So I mean, certainly nil is fine. That means there is no minimum bid. I think a $0 minimum bid is actually a weird idea because there's not going to be a bid value that could be 0. So the minimum, in fact, would not make sense to have a 0. So I think it's either nil or greater than 0, I think are the two options for minimum bid dollars. So let's kind of write the test. Anytime I've got sort of I say something that so clearly sounds like a test, I just write it right away that way. So it validates that the minimum bid dollars is either nil or greater than 0. Right, this is exactly like we had before. So this is ugly, and I'm going to copy and paste this, and this is why you use shoulda matchers or a custom thing, but whatever. And hey, tester code, I totally agree. And this is why you use shoulda matchers, like I said, but that sort of allow nil issue I'm not sure about, and I don't feel like taking the time to dig into that code. Although I have submitted one patch to shoulda matchers before, maybe two, but this is not going to. I'm not going to look into this now. Okay. All right. Whoops. So that's fine. Display description, there's really nothing to do there, so that's done. Admin follow-up needed. Oh, okay, this is an interesting one. So I think I forgot. Let's go take a look at this migration. And if I look at it, I have null false. Oh, that's not, what am I talking about? This one. I did not set a default. So I always set a default with Booleans because I hate if you have nulls in Booleans. I think it's so frustrating later. So I am going to fix this now. And the way that we can do this test-driven is this way. So I'll say it defaults the admin follow-up needed to false. And then I can just say expect subject admin follow-up needed to equal false. And yeah, so I see I got nil instead of false, whereas if I have a default in the database, it'll pick that up. So now I can add a migration. So default admin follow up needed to false for donations. Change column. I don't always remember the syntax in this either, but I think this one's simple enough. So it's like change column and donations, admin follow-up needed, Boolean, default, false. I think that's what I have to do. All right, and that worked. That's done. Okay, so this fulfillment type. And I think that there were two options from that email that I received. There was the one which is, do you take it away? And then there is the second, which is, do you get a certificate? Let's go back and look at that file. Here, I'm going to switch to me. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm going to switch to me. So I need to find that file, and I'm not sure where it is. So I don't want to accidentally show something on my computer I didn't mean to. So let's look at this. Donation form. Where is it? Oh, hold on, caller. 1 second. Oh, I know where I put it. Right. Where all content goes to. Where all content goes to not be found, which is the Notes app in iOS and iOS and Mac OS 10, even though I always use it. So here we go. So here's that email. Let's see what they said here. Takeaway of certificate or the item. Okay, so those were the two types. So let's go back and add that in. Okay. So with an enum, so I start with this, which is I just check to see that the enum is set the way I would think it is. So it has the expected, let's see. That's an ugly name for a test, but I don't have better right now. So I say expect described class, and then it's going to be fulfillment types. And then to equal, and then this is a hash, and the hash is the keys are the names, so that the two we're going to have are fulfillment types will be like, you know, either item, make that the first one, or certificate, make those the two. So in other words, like there's going to be a method on donation called fulfillment types that will have each of the fulfillment types with their index in the enum. This will be what's stored in the database. So I'll start with that. Okay, so undefined method fulfillment types because we've not declared that enum. So we're going to do that. And then it's an array of those values. Oh, now that's I think this is fulfillment type, yeah. And then it pluralizes that. So there we go. And then I'm going to say by default, we do not want it to have a fulfillment type, right? So, and this will sort of double as testing that method exists, which we don't have to test exactly, but if you go back and read this as someone that's unfamiliar maybe with Rails or with the application, you know, there's a little bit of magic going on in this whole deal, so this test will make it a bit more explicit. So it has a nil fulfillment type upon initialization. Or upon, that's silly, after. Okay, that's now what we thought it'd be. Cool. Well, that was not that bad. So those are sort of most tedious of all the models. Now, let's just take a look through again and add the inverses where we need it. I'll make some notes here. And like inverses aren't the end of the world to add later if you forget to now, but they always surprise me later, and I'm always like, well, why didn't I just do this at the time? It's dumb. So we've got the auction, bid type. Which other ones did we have? Donor. Is that it? Looks like that's it. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to have this idea of like auctions or donations being complete, but I don't have that yet. So I'm just going to say that auctions had donations, then we'll have two different types, like complete or not complete. And we'll probably, as of the time that the donation window ends, actually set which ones are complete. That's sort of the logic I'm thinking about, but that's behavior. We're not really that far yet. We're just getting our nouns in place. We'll get the verbs going later. So that I think we have now. Oh no, I didn't implement it. Okay, so that's done. Bid type and donor. And part of the thing that I like about going test-driven, even on the stupid things like declaring if it has a relationship or not, is I just hate thinking about whether I'm going to test it or not. It doesn't add that much overhead, and it adds a lot of overhead when you make mistakes you didn't expect to. So this is my flow. You know, I just get into it. It's nice and simple, and then I don't have to sort of go through the thought process of whether or not a given thing needs a spec or not. Then the spec itself becomes a lot more interesting. You know, it's sort of a complete documentation of what I intended to do. Or at least, I mean, complete is a little, it's more complete at the very least. Okay, so got that done. and then donor. Now donor, remember, is the user. So I'm always like hesitant. Anytime there's a different name, it sort of is a hint that I may have to think about this a little bit more. But I think that it is the case that a user just has a donation, and I think that's what you'd expect it to be called. Okay, so this donation does not have a user ID foreign key, right? Because we called it donor ID. So, geez, that time of night where my typing starts to fail. Okay, added that. So I added the inverses for all three. Good. Let's take another look through, see if anything jumps out. Yeah, it seems right now. Or right enough to commit it at least. Commit, add all, commit, and push. Remember if we're in a branch. Now again, I should have been doing this in the branch in the first place. If I showed good workflow here, and I wasn't, but I will do it now, just to make the history a little clear. All right, well, here we go. Get all right, well, we're just about done with the basic models. We'll do bid next, and then I think we're going with just with things that are ready. So I think bid is the last one that's ready. So let's just do it. Ugh, stupid dollars again. My nemesis at this point. All right, I'm going to make a note on that issue about this while I'm thinking about it then. Oh, good. Okay, I didn't make it specific to that other model. So let's implement this bid model. Fine. This also makes me think that we're going to have to get to sooner or later that idea of a donation being sort of complete. We're going to have to clean out these draft donations versus real. So, yeah, for now, I'm just going to not consider that, and then we'll probably make that an episode unto itself. Okay. So let's just do this. Now, okay, this is interesting. So this playstat attribute, so it's like when was the bid placed? This is a hint that we're missing some attributes on other models where I tend to separate the idea of when something is created in the database, created update in the database from like when the real life event happened in the case that we're sort of tracking that. The bid is a real life event that we may want to have as a different time than the created at time. Now, the reason that it's important to have is that in something like a live auction, there's going to be an order of things. Part of me thinks that we're putting place that in a little bit too early. But I'm going to keep it. We thought about this the other day. I think we had reasons. Wouldn't be the end of the world to take out later if we wanted to. So no big deal. We'll do these as they are in the issue. So we definitely have to have a donation with a bid. We definitely have to have a bidder with a bid. We definitely have to have an amount. Also a quantity. Sometimes if like the quantity is 1 on a donation, we'll just default this, but we can do that in the clients themselves. And then play stats also. So I'm not positive how we're going to deal with bids. So if it's a live auction or a silent auction, the idea is quite simple. If it's a teacup deal, what the bid is a little more complicated of an idea. But I'm going to say that even in that case, we probably can use the bid idea, and maybe we'll have another class to deal with the idea of the teacup. I want to have this part be simple, and we'll see how complicated that's going to be to support. So I'm just going to keep it as it is here. So all of these are required. Yeah. Same issue as we saw before. So we're going to move this. So if you remember now, it was bids and then users, and then, well, let's remind ourselves by just looking at the migration from before. Column. Okay. All right, let's go through these. All right. Now for donation, I think all of these we validate the presence of, right? So I'm just going to sort of set up what the attributes are, and then we'll go through the validations all at the same time. Now this is probably going to have so it's just, same as before. So we just have to set the class name to user here. Okay. And then these 3 attributes. No, that doesn't save me anything. I think 3 is the magic number where it saves you something. Amount dollars. All right, and then we're going to validate the presence of every one of these. And yes, I know, by the way, that you can do, you know, the %i here. Oh, so you can also do this, and this is going to make all these symbols. And, you know, I see it all the time in people's code. I think it's fine. I don't know. It doesn't, there's really no magic in it to me, so I'll just do strings. So I'm going to copy these. And I think that this is sort of ugly to do. I haven't really done it much elsewhere, but it just also seems ugly, frankly, to do it the other way. So now it may be that you can, I wonder if you can, I wonder what happens if you pass an array here. Let's look. I should know this, but I don't. No, you got to do one at a time. So that is perfectly fine. We'll just do it that way. Okay. So we've got the validation. So I think donation and bidder are done. Oh, we should do the inverses while we're at it. And I'll just do it instead of adding that separate inverse, because I just did that because I forgot last time. I'll just do that now. So donation. Okay, so add the inverse. I think that's it with donation then. Bidder, same deal. Oops. All right, so that seems fine. So the amount dollars, that's going to be greater than 0. So we will add that. Oops. All right, this one, we will use that. So validates. Now this is one, so allow by match. You cannot set attribute. Expect a class to be able to set amount dollars to A, B, C, D. Got 0 instead. I do not know what that means. So following my rule of shoulda matchers, which is I'm just not going to argue with it. just do it normally. Okay. So you'll notice that I always test a specific error instead of saying like expect, subject to be valid or some such thing. That's because, who knows what other validations you're going to add. And it's always just best to test the specific errors. And I also always test the message just to make sure that what I think is causing the validation issue on this attribute is actually the thing that is. And I'm not, maybe I don't do that 100% of the time, but I think I mostly do. Okay. So mount dollars. Yeah, we've got that issue that we've got a bug on from before, but I think otherwise this is fine. Okay. So the quantity has to be greater than or equal to 1 and less than I'm thinking about this. So I think that the thing that I paused about there is that it's going to be a little weird if we have 2 bids for for different quantities on the same. In other words, you have like bid 1 for donated item A, and bid 1 has quantity 1, and let's say donated item A has 2 units, quantity of 2. And then you've got a second bid that has a quantity of 2. Well, is it winning? Maybe it's winning for one item and not for the other. That is complicated. I think that what that tells me is that for a given bid probably should be for quantity 1. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's wrong. Yeah. I mean, I think that maybe for the client, we may choose to implement it that way. I think for now, we can say, I think it's fine to say that, and hey, maybe depending on what we do with the auction logic, we may change this, but I think saying that the quantity is either, greater than or equal to 1 or less than or equal to the quantity of the donation, I think that that's fine. So let's do that. Is, let's see, greater than or equal to 1 and okay, that's written like a human wrote it actually. So we're just going to test each part of the range. So first I'm going to say subject, I'm going to say that donation equals donation.new quantity 2. And then, you know what, I'll just do that. And then let's see. So subject dot quantity equals 0. So now I'm going to say that this one, we should have that error, or we should have an error at this point. I have no idea if that's what the actual message is going to be, but we will see. So let's find out if this can, I don't remember what this is. I think I know the syntax for this, but let's see. So I think I can say greater than, like anytime I'm like, oh, what's the syntax of this, magic macro in Rails, I sort of think about just avoiding it, but just writing a method that does this. But let's see, because it does read pretty cleanly. And the problem is what if the donation is nil? I don't want it to blow up. So what I was going to do is donation quantity here, and then implement a method called donation quantity, but I don't know. It's going to annoy me. I'm just going to do it this way. So validate, let's see, this is quantity between one and donation quantity. All right, I think that's fine. I'm going to add this guard here again too, just because I hate when the validation messages are weird and they don't make sense when you see them. So I always just guard it at the top to make sure it doesn't run in the context that wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to say return unless, and it'll be quantity and donation dot. Well, I'm just going to say donation dot try quantity. Some people hate try, and I kind of get it, but in this case, I think it reads fine. Okay, so now we'll know that these are, I can use them because of that guard. So I'll say unless quantity, let's see, greater than or equal to 1 and I'm going to write this a nicer way. Let's see, 1 less than or equal to quantity. Actually, I don't think I can do that in Ruby, so never mind. So we'll do 1 less than or equal to quantity and quantity less than or equal to donation quantity. There we go. Cool. That's good. That's fine. And then we had placed at. It's possible we're going to validate something about this, but I don't know. I don't think now. We're not even sure really how we're going to use that. I sort of feel uncomfortable. I've got it in there still, but it's okay. All right, so I guess we've got a bid then. Oh, I wonder if we should have, that's interesting. So I guess I was going to say I wonder if we should have bid type on the bid model, but I don't think we need it because I think the donation itself has the bid type on it, right? So yeah, it does. I don't think we need that. All right, well, I think this is fine for now. We handled the inverses on these earlier. We've added the validations. Yeah, I think these are fine. Okay, so add bid model. You can see how nice and consistent I am in the naming of these, which I'm not at all consistent on. Okay. Well, oh. All right. So I think the only, we've got this payment model that we don't have anything for yet, but I don't know what the requirements are on this yet. So I'm just make a note about that. You know what? Actually, this is the sort of thing that I would like in the list. So I think I'm going to add a label. So like missing requirements. And then I'll add that to it. That'll make it nice and clear, what we need to go ask someone about. All right. Well, so we have added our models. Here, I'll run, this is fun, so I'll run so give us an idea of what we've created. So, you could just sort of read through this to get a full sense now of what the application can do. You can see I'm a little consistent. Like, I've got, for some, I just list out all of them. All of the specs. Other, this one, I categorize them, which is kind of nice, but not everywhere. But that's okay. I'm not too precious about it. I mean, I think this is attractive. I think it requires some overhead, and I think if we ever want to do it that way, we can see the difference there and make a choice. But okay, so we've got donation, auction admin, bid type, user, donation category, and auction. All seem right. And I think next time we will handle this little bug issue because I really want to make it not dollar specific. The rest of the application isn't, so there's nothing US centric about it minus this one issue, and it just feels too ugly to keep it that way. So next time we'll do that, but I said I was going to quit before 12 and just about 12, so I'm going to do that. All right, so till next time, let me switch back and say see ya. Thanks for sticking with. Glad we had something easy to do tonight because I had just a little bit of energy, and that was all just boring model setup work. So we'll do that currency issue next time. I think that's sort of fun. There's a gem I think I'm going to use that is pretty elegant for that. That gives us just some helpers to deal with that, multiple currencies and currency codes and whatnot. I'm tempting myself to do that right now. But nah, I need to get some sleep. So till next time, thanks.